Forget everything you knew about creative testing and performance creative or Meta, because Meta just flipped the script. The algorithm has evolved and creative diversity is now the name of the game. In today's episode of D2C Diaries, we break down exactly how to win and thrive in this new era. We go into the theory behind Meta's creative diversity rules, real examples of what's working for us since this update, and how we're adapting our process to drive incrementality and outperform the competition. This is how you future-proof your brand and how to dominate in the age of Andromeda. Welcome to a D2C Diaries, and I'm excited to go through this mastermind with you today. Probably one of the most important training sessions that we have done. And in this session, we'll be going very, very deep into, firstly, what does that mean? So what is the difference between creative ID, entity ID, and how to ensure that we're not being penalized for avoiding or for having too much creative similarity. We're also going to be going into loads of examples of iterations as well, and what a good iteration looks like in the day and age of diversification of creative. And thirdly, what this actually means to your creative process and how it needs to evolve the way that you are working through not only iteration sprints, but also your net new creative. So there's lots in here that should give huge amounts of direction for brands, for agencies, for everyone, that can really help impact and drive the best performance that you can going into 2026. Hey guys, very quick one. Our sponsors at Wayflyer are offering our listeners 25k in upfront capital for a 1.8k on the run up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, to give you a boost when you need it most. Imagine this, your ads are finally dialed in, CPAs are down, AOV is up, and you can feel the momentum building. But then you run into unexpected costs, which I'm sure we've all seen. Your ad budgets are nearly capped, and your next move, the one that could turn a good month into a fantastic month, depends on cash that isn't landing for another 2 weeks. This is how Wayflyer helped brands like Wild, True Classics, Doc and Bay, to name a few, achieve growth with funding when they actually need it. They're giving ambitious D2C brands $25,000 in upfront capital for $1,800 total cost in the run up to Black Friday, Cyber Monday. That's a 1.2% per month over 6 months. No equity, no hidden fees, just fuel to move when it matters most. So you can double down on what's working, scale your best performing ads while they're still pumping, stay stocked. As we know, stock can be an issue during this period, so reorder your fastest movers before they sell out, and move fast, right? Connect Shopify or Amazon and get approved in hours, not weeks. Timing is everything. Often, the brands that win aren't the ones with the biggest balance sheets. They're agile and ready to act when the window opens. So go to the link in the description and get $25,000 in your account next week from the brand that helps you fund your favorite brands. To kick off, let's just firstly touch on why the algorithm has changed and how it has changed. And over the past few years, Meta as a platform has very much been shifting away from hands-on in-account towards automation. It requires strategic volume-based approach over traditional concept isolation. As we know, Andromeda can support 5,000 ads a week versus 50. And the brands that understand this and cater to Andromeda's needs are the ones that are going to win on this platform. Ultimately, performance now depends on strategic volume, speed, and iteration of creative. And you need to focus on high volume of content that appeals to distinctly different audience personas and preferences. However, as we know through this creative diversity, it's not just about volume. It's all of the things that I said above in terms of differentiating persona, but also differentiating visuals, the content vehicles that we are utilizing. And that in turn is what is going to drive incremental reach and net new eyeballs on the ads that we are delivering. We've essentially gone from a deterministic to a probabilistic feed. So essentially social, pre-TikTok, let's say, was based on social-based followers. So in your algorithm, what you would see would be the engagement based on your followers and friends. Now it's data backed, based on your preferences and the level of intent the algorithm thinks you have based on targeting certain content to you. And if you extrapolate that forward, it's going to be hyper in depth AI delivery that has such a deep understanding of all of us that will know exactly what creative or what ads to put in front of us. Because as we know, we all like to consume content in different ways, and what resonates to me might not resonate to someone else, even within the same persona range as myself. So this kind of brings us to this idea of soulmate theory. You should essentially operate under this philosophy that there is a perfect creative for every single user. Instead of which audience fits the ad, the question becomes which specific ad version will resonate most with this single user right now. And it's a shorthand for for Andromeda's goal, essentially, which is every ad impression should feel as if the advertiser crafted that exact image, line of copy, persona-based messaging specifically for the person viewing that. And that is where we are moving towards and what we are going to be going through today in a little bit more depth. Quick one. We are hiring creative strategists at the UK. So if you want to join the UK's #1 independent meta agency named by Meta themselves and be part of the most curious, innovative and fast growing creative strategy teams in the UK, then send me an email down below. We work with the UK's leading D2C brands like Heights, Mindful Chef, Space Goods, 47 Skin and Nutrition Geeks. We've recently been nominated for Meta's Creative Diversity Award because of the innovative ads that we are producing. And also, we have one of the best development programs for creative strategy in the UK. So if you want to be part of that ecosystem and our team and want to find out more, then make sure you send me your CV, link in bio, lucas@hambymedia.co.uk. Used to be about more ads, as I just mentioned, but today it's very much about different ads. And Meta shared this, our reps at Meta shared this with us, which essentially breaks down, what that scale looks like, essentially from less differentiated to more differentiated. We want to be over here as much as we can because Meta are going to reward us for that. We are going to drive lower CPMs. We're going to drive more incrementality through the ads that we're producing and therefore get in front of new customers. You can see this one, similar message, same style. So the messaging is different. We might previously have run this as an iteration to just test a slight differentiation of that messaging. That's not going to cut it anymore. And we need to be driving more differentiation through not only persona and messaging, but also through the visuals that we are seeing. This one in the middle, very different message, same style. Again, we might have run this as an iteration. We can't do that anymore. And thirdly, this one, which is where we need to be moving towards, which is very differentiated message and a very different style, because these people are going to want to consume this idea of soulmate theory, these two ads that really are saying the same thing in different ways, but it's going to resonate with different types of people. So essentially, they penalize us now based on creative similarity. So if two ads look similar, even if the copy is different, it will be treated as the same entity ID, meaning we're going to be damaged from the point of incremental reach. There's not going to be any fresh delivery and also lower performance as well. So let's actually break down what this looks like in terms of theory. So we have an entity ID and a creative ID. Essentially, entity ID is why two ads that look the same get treated as the same by Meta. So they will get grouped under the same entity ID. View entity ID almost like a fingerprint. We all have a unique fingerprint, whereas essentially Meta is saying now that if we use a fingerprint that is too similar to the existing one, it's just going to be grouped into the same and it's going to piggyback off the exact same learnings. And it's going to do that because they're too visually similar, even if the messaging is different. So essentially, this means that performance data, delivery and learnings are going to be shared. So it's going to piggyback and absorb the learnings from the original, which means we're not going to be driving any new incremental reach. We're not going to be getting in front of new customers. And our frequency is likely going to increase as well. Doesn't mean there's not a place for creative similarity, but we need to be much more bullish on the differentiation. So essentially, every ad that gets uploaded has a creative ID as it gets uploaded into the ad account, whereas it will likely group under the same entity ID if they are too similar. So just to show a few examples that Meta shared with us, we have two here. One is, well, they're both offer focused, so very bottom of funnel. They will have different creative IDs, right, if they're launched into the ad account at different times. However, the back end is going to pick them up as having the same entity ID because essentially the image is identical. They are too similar and we're going to get penalized for that. the funny thing is this will also get penalized because although the product is different here, the message is the same, the offer is the same. They are very similar images, right? Like we've got that kind of top down tabletop shot of the sunglasses. We're on the same marble backdrop. So actually, although they are different, on paper, in Meta's eyes, they are not different. So these really, you might have run 1,000 ads, but Meta won't deem it as 1,000 ads if they are too similar. Now this one, it has the differentiation, and these won't be grouped under the same entity ID, because as you can see, we've taken the same offer, shop now, we've taken the same sunglasses, but we've applied it to a very different setting. So we've created that differentiation. So therefore this could resonate more with a different type of persona potentially. And this actually, a great example is to share with one of our brands that we work with, Space Goods. And Meta actually used this as an example. They are grouping all of these individual buckets of creative as the same ad, even though there are differences within the ad account. So this one is an example, same visual, same hook, but different video length. So we're iterating on the video length. Meta's eyes don't care about that. This one, same visual angle and persona, but different hook. So that was audio-based hook was different. So because there's no visual differentiation within the first 3 seconds, which in Meta's eyes is one of the most important things to ensure that we're not grouping under the same entity ID, it's essentially done exactly that. And the third one, which is the most shocking in my eyes, different creators, but they look very similar and they've got a very similar setting. It's grouped that under the same entity ID, which shows, not only do we need to differentiate through the visuals, the scene, the shots types that we are utilizing, but also differentiate the personas that we're using. So, really making sure that we are tackling into different age demographics, different ethnicities, ensuring that we are changing the setting and all of these areas, because that has actually been grouped under the same entity ID, and even though they are two completely different creatives. So why does this matter for creative diversity? Well, as I said, if creatives are assigned a new entity ID, it will start fresh in terms of audience and learning. So if we are trying to push incremental reach and getting in front of new customers, it's important that we are generating different entity IDs to allow us to do that, or otherwise we're going to plateau. True creative diversity compared to small creative tweaks is going to be key for that incremental reach and unlocking new audiences. And if a creative is given the same entity ID, it will share learnings and delivery, which will essentially limit our ability to reach net new audiences. So just to give you an example of that, how many ads do you see here if you were to count all of these? Well, it's 20 ads. So in our eyes, we've uploaded 20 ads into the ad account, whereas if Meta attributes similarities under the same entity ID, then actually what we see is 5 ads, right? So it really doesn't make much of a difference. So this is why we need to not just be driving volume without a real strategic approach to how we are differentiating the visuals, the persona, and the messaging. And I'm going to show you a pyramid that we view now to ensure that we are really driving that differentiation. But I love this quote from Taylor Holiday. If an ad is being struck with the same historical data as another ad, it's not going to give that ad any delivery opportunity relative to the desired outcome. So this just shows how important it is that we are leaning into that. And look, this is how we used to approach testing, right? We would test 3 different headlines that would approach the angle in a slightly different way. So this one, the first one, benefit first. The second one, fear mongering, and the third is more USP focused. Whereas now they're going to get grouped onto the same entity ID. So how we need to approach it now, rather than say this, where they all look very, very similar. And, there's just some small tweaks in terms of, maybe what the benefits we're sharing within the static as the example here, or the offer or the headline. Now, really how we should approach this is doing one version with a creator selfie. So maybe it's a creator selfie, a native style ad that is overlaying some of this, some of the messaging on top of that in a way that looks like it's come from the consumer. Maybe we do one that is like this example here with a bold overlay or headline, And then we could do one that's like a completely different version, right? So it's taking the winning messaging or the messaging and applying that to a different vehicle. So one could be like, the native Reddit format that we've seen. And these all would be targeting the same motivator. Whereas if we wanted to take this one step further, we don't only just want to iterate on format or vehicle or the hook. We also want to be thinking about persona and diversification of persona. So the building blocks, as I mentioned before, in this pyramid that we're looking at, in Meta's eyes, they're going to see the most differentiation. And there's no one is the best, one is the worst. But if we're looking through the lens of, not grouping under the same entity ID, format is going to be viewed as the most different, right? So that's going from UGC to static to hyperpod, etc. Vehicle or hook is the second most important. So that is in terms of differentiating, if you've got high production as a format, a vehicle in high production might be a podcast ad, it might be a street interview, etc. And then the hook as well to go with that. As I say, the first 3 seconds is the most important part of differentiation to ensure that we aren't getting grouped under the same entity ID. The next is persona and angle, which I think actually all three of these are the most important areas in terms of creating that. Because if we're changing format our vehicle, we should also be diversifying and testing how we are more intricate about our persona-based research to ensure that we are differentiating personas as much as possible. So this is going much deeper into, their core motivators as a consumer. This should be going into, what are below the surface level pain points. If a surface level pain point is, it's a product that helps with spots. If we really, the solution is it helps reduce spots, whereas the pain point is acne, as an example. Whereas if we go much deeper than that and tie in core human desires, we're linking this to things like confidence, and other core human desires, status potentially. So we need to be thinking about persona breakdowns in a much more intricate way to ensure we're creating differentiation there. And Cody, I saw he put something on Twitter about this. It's not just visuals, it's the whole package. Visual copy, offer, and most importantly, persona. If Meta doesn't think the changes fundamentally alter the experience or outcomes, and thus the targeting, it saves compute and buckets them together. So as I say, this is where that really, the importance of differentiating that whole package comes into play. And as I said, the idea of that soulmate theory, this ties into that, there's a perfect ad out there for everyone. So it's important that we are making those iterative differentiation to ensure that we are driving that as much as possible. So in terms of that testing hierarchy, if you're testing a specific persona or an angle and want to uncover winning messaging, I would recommend to only do that through net new variations. Because if there's a creative that doesn't already exist within the ad account and you're running one new concept and you have 4 variations of that concept, that is where you want to test the messaging. Because in Meta's eyes, when that goes into the ad account, it is going to optimize for the ad that is performing best, and therefore that is where we're going to see the entity ID be taken. Versus if we're testing messaging through an iterative approach, it's going to group those under the same creative, and therefore it's not as impactful or as important a creative test. Once you've found a winner, and let's say you want to then iterate it on the ad account, previously, we would do lots of small iterations that would be isolating soft metrics like click-through rate, hold rate, thumb stop, as an example. You then, when that's in the ad account, you need to make sure if it's a video that we are making big visual changes within the first 3 seconds, so it doesn't group it under the same entity ID. But also you want to iterate on things like format, vehicle as well, because I think that's really important. So you've got something that is working within the ad account, and let's say we wanted to make a small tweak to that or adapt on that. An iteration should be taking that winning messaging and applying it to a different vehicle. So as I said, I gave some examples of what that could be in the nature of a static earlier. But, there's 50, 100 plus different vehicles that will sit under each creative type. If you want to iterate on a winner to unlock new audiences, change the format, vehicle, or hook, whilst also the persona or angle. So if I've got a top spender, I'm like, okay, I'd like to test this against a different persona. Let's say that in the first 3 seconds, we've got a screenshot overlay of a woman in her 30s. And it's a green screen concept with a woman in her 30s. Let's say it's a eyelash serum, because we've got this example later. If we wanted to then test that against an older demographic, the visual change we might make to not only change the persona, but also the visual, is put an older woman's eyelashes behind the screen versus the younger woman. And by doing that, we're changing the first 3 seconds, and we are resonating with a different type of persona, which is an older woman, as an example in this case. And if you've iterated on an existing ad with a big visual change, you can test the same visual against multiple messaging tests. So yeah, important to think about these areas. I think the last one is one that we are still experimenting with. We've seen some success doing this, some not, but I think the key is we need to make those big visual changes to ensure that we essentially are aligning to soulmate theory, as I said, and we're getting in front of new eyes. And as I said, same messaging tests are still working, but through the lens of net new concepts. So when you're running, under maybe one ad set, you've got 4 different ads or, ad IDs. It is going to optimize for the messaging that is resonating most. So it doesn't mean that we can't still do this and test 4 different ways to tackle that messaging. But the goal is to identify which message resonates with our target persona and how to communicate that message most effectively. So, a winner will still emerge essentially, even if grouped under the same entity ID. And this just brings me on to the importance now of differentiating the way that we are utilizing vehicles. So here's just a few examples of a couple of different vehicles that we might lean into: founder ads, podcast, VSLs, whiteboard education. Let's say that we had a podcast ad that performed really, really well, and it was more education first with an expert. Let's take that messaging, let's put it in third person and apply it to a whiteboard concept. So you can see by doing that, we're going to be potentially appealing to a completely different consumer, because Meta knows and has that understanding that there's a perfect piece of creative for us out there. And a great example of this is like what we did with 47 Skin. We took an original founder VSL. We then did a before and after static winner, taken into a different format. And then this one is a great example again. We've taken the original high prod founder story, we flipped it into third person narrative, so it's talking about Nick in the third person. And then off the back of that, we've found another winner, and we've been able to drive more incrementality as a result of that. And we've used different visuals with a different hook as well. So I'll just show you a quick couple of moments of this so you can get an idea. So yeah, you get the idea. Again, you don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. It's like taking that best performing messaging and think about through the lens of how can I say this, but in a different way through a different vehicle. So let's go through some examples of iterating with visual differentiation, because I think this is what is going to change the part of the process the most, is how we're doing iterations. Now, we do it at our agency through iterative sprints on a weekly basis. Whereas now we're going to have to change that approach, because you're never going to be able to drive the same volume and output as previously, because a lot of those tests might have been subtle messaging tweaks, as an example. So how we can't iterate, let's say we've launched this in the ad account, it works well, and then we want to test all these 3 as well. There's not as much point doing that anymore, because, although we can still piggyback off the learnings of the original creative, it's not going to do what we set out of that iteration. So an example of what you might actually do instead is this one, which I love because it's not only changing the visual, but it's changing the persona. So we have a younger female individual here. You know, let's say we've created a really in-depth persona for women that are 25 to 34. This creative, we ran it didn't work, or maybe we were seeing it was driving more impressions from older demos, and we were like, okay, well, let's run this same creative but against a new persona by changing the visual. So as you can see, we've changed the visual of this persona, and then we've done messaging tests off the back of that. We wanted to push this one step further. Maybe each of these headlines would be a slightly different angle. So we could test joint pain with collagen. We could test, reverse aging, skin, etc., etc. So as I say, this is a perfect example because we're not only changing the visuals, but we're also able to change the persona. It's part of that wider layering system of iterations now. So now I want to run through some hook iteration examples with you. As I say, the first 3 seconds is what Meta is going to look at. So it's really, really important we are visually changing the first 3 seconds. It may ignore a new message if it's the same visual. And another thing that our reps have told us is that a different thumbnail massively helps avoid entity ID grouping as well. So this is something we are currently in the process of testing. So I want to show you an example now of how we're doing this. One means is through hook variations with VO3, because it's a great way of, helping to really emphasize a message, especially through visual metaphors. So here's a good example of, an ad that wasn't performing that great in the account, or the TSR was below a 30% benchmark. We iterated on it by changing the visual, and look at the outcome. It now has become a top spender in the account. So we've taken that, and as you can see, a great thing that we've done subtly here is, again, persona change, right? It's a younger persona here. Whereas now it's very obvious that we are targeting an older persona. We are resonating with that audience. Our targeting is ensuring we're getting in front of the right consumer that is likely to buy from us. So we can see that rapid change of aging in the skin, which really emphasizes through a visual metaphor what the problem is. And I think that's a great example of a VO hook iteration that has worked well for us and that you can lean into as part of this creative diversification and differentiation. Another one is just evergreen iterations. Now, this is just a very quick example of it's a very quick cuts of UGC low prod footage in the hook. We've changed the visuals, and now the second one has become a top spender in the account. And this was only a subtle change. This isn't as much of layer stacking the vehicle, the format, the persona, etc. But yeah, just to show you. So this is another way that we can iterate. And essentially what we've done is we've just gone into the asset library, pulled different visuals that maybe drive a little bit more, just movement in the frame, which again, we know can really help drive better TSR. But now this is really driven the account and become a top spender. Cool. The next one, again, I love this example because it is visually changing the persona. And it's a great example of that. So this first one, this is the last brand I mentioned to you, younger persona in the frame. So you can see younger eyes to this one, which now just by changing the visual behind the screen is going to be appealing to an older demographic. I would say this is still playing, if we remember that chart at the start and, going from less differentiated to more differentiated, I would still say this is still playing the edge, the line a little bit too much because there's not huge visual differentiation. We might want to do more there to be able to differentiate that as much as possible. But in this case, it worked well. I think another one you can do is a one-shot UGC green screen. So this is another way you can really differentiate differentiate the visuals. You can take a standard UGC concept from a creator that maybe is a top spender. If you've got her speaking face to camera, as we know, there are apps like CapCut, Premiere that now can just remove the background entirely, and you can put it in a completely different setting. So taking the same creator and layering them over a different background. This is an example we found. So again, that might have just been a straight face to camera concept, but we can differentiate it through an iterative approach by changing the visuals and what we see on screen. So now to go through some static iteration examples. Again, this is a good example of showing how we are changing the frame, right? And this is where things like Nano Banana are going to become even more important to your team. So you're creating loads of differentiated AI image-based, product selections, holding the product, all of these different things, so we can differentiate those visuals. Although this is great and this can work, I think we could improve this further by changing angle and persona within the headlines. So not only are we going from this to this, but what are we going to do with the headline or the messaging to be able to differentiate the persona selection? As I say, we can go really in depth with that persona selection by going much deeper than what we see on the surface layer with a persona. What are their biggest motivators? What are their failed solutions? What are some of those uncovered pain points that we're not currently addressing within the creative? This is another iteration that worked really well for us. After these creative diversity updates from Meta. This is essentially just quite a quick win, taking a Reddit style static. And what we wanted to do was make it very, very clear who this person that we wanted to target was and who we wanted to resonate with. So we just added an image of the persona on screen. As part of the comment. And again, that has helped drive that differentiation. Like I said before, we might want to push that even further through even getting in front of a potentially new persona through that messaging. Cool. Another good example of just a very easy native based one. Now, again, a good example from our previous slide. Let's say that Reddit one did well. Taking that, applying it to a text message, again, creating that differentiation, getting in front of a different type of person. So we could be from this one here, and then we iterated it on and put a split screen and put the product front and center. By doing that, it actually, slightly brought it down the funnel to people that are aware of the brand, but putting Now in Boots really helped because it gave it almost that PR stamp of approval and helped build trust and drive CTR as a result of that. Another one, which again is playing it very on edge in terms of differentiation, but this one actually, the second one you see here on the right became a top spender. So what we've done here is essentially just adding much more context around what some of the features are of that product. And we've changed the composition of the frame as well as a result of this. But this again is playing it on edge in terms of, probably sitting in the middle of the park of differentiation. And that's this is another one that we did that was more seasonal based. This is a great example because we're ticking a lot of boxes with this one. We're changing the format, which is the biggest swing change we can make to create that differentiation. We've gone from a static, we've taken the text on the static and we've applied it to a mashup here, which again has worked really well. Very simple, very quick change. This could even be a static in itself, right? That frame there, that thumbnail. But again, that has really, really helped create that differentiation by taking that messaging from a static, applying it to a hybrid or a mashup style creative. Another one that, again, is technically changing format is going from a static to a motion graphic. There are loads of tools that can help you do this now. We did this actually, I think, through Adobe After Effects, but there's loads of AI tools that can help bring statics to life. So we've gone from this static here, which is the top spender, to this one. Again, just through subtle changes in visual, in motion, we might be able to appeal to a slightly different consumer. And this is my favorite that we've already gone through, but completely changing persona with the image, which is one of my favorite ways that we can iterate at scale. And again, this is why I think it becomes so important that you're thinking about, how this impacts every stage of the process, right? Because this now means that we need to be even more bullish when we're working with UGC creators to get static shots of them, evergreen shots of them holding the product, because we know that the more differentiation we have in the personas down to age, race, all of these different factors, that is going to help us potentially get in front of new customers. We've seen this before with other accounts, even from a UGC perspective. We had very southern based accents in the ad account, and we weren't driving incremental reach. And then as soon as we brought in more diversity with northern accents, as an example, that subtle change, but a big one from a perspective of persona, that really helped drive incrementality. And that's how we need to be thinking about creative diversification. It's not just through the lens of how we iterate, how we make it different. The key and the motivator behind everything and why we change anything, there needs to be a hypothesis behind why we're doing something. And we need to be thinking about it in the research phase, not when we're coming to iterating on ads. This is another one. So actually plugging together two different format types, so static and high production split screen. And this is a good example I saw from Dirty, where it's a static on the bottom, we got a high prod on the top, and we've merged both of those together into one. Again, quite a lazy iteration, but again, can work. So now, and we're very early in this process, right, of what this actually means to us. And we're doing lots of tests right now. I think I see on Twitter and X, there's huge amounts of controversy and debate around what this means and how we should be using it. So we're early days, but some of the big things that we are changing right now is less but more intentional iterations. I think the way you need to view it is an iteration now, it has to be viewed in a bigger swing nature. You're never going to achieve the same volume of iterations you are right now to ensure that you are not being grouped under the same entity ID. So less but more intentional iterations. So therefore, as a result, we're probably, if we've got, say, we need to do 100 iterations in the month, we're probably now doing 50 to 60 that are more intentional, because therefore they are going to drive more impact and therefore performance, and putting the rest of the 40% towards net new variations of concepts, because that is where we can be testing persona headline tests, messaging adjustments, a lot more of those more subtle based tweaks that previously we might have tested in iterations. Now we need to test them as net news. We are moving to more of a bi-weekly iteration sprint, because we are being much more intentional about the iterations that we're putting forward. We want to be spending more time on not only how we are hypothesizing those changes and briefing in those changes, but also to allow post-production teams and design teams to be able to actually, make those bigger changes to ensure they are visually different. More intention when briefing hook visuals. So whether that's for UGC creators, whether that's for, high production, whatever it is, be more intentional about what the visual direction is of those hooks. Because that example I shared at the start of Space Goods, where two different personas, same setting, we could have got around that by differentiating one of their briefs with being very clear about how to differentiate the visuals, or be in a slightly different setting than a kitchen. Messaging tweaks through net new variations, we've already touched on that, but that is where you want to be doing the large chunk of your messaging tests. More intentional persona research. As I said, really diversifying the personas and getting much deeper to their core motivators, it's going to be really, really important, because those subtle messaging tweaks, headline changes, hook adjustments is how we are going to be getting in not only the core bucketed persona, but also the different verticals of persona that sit beneath that. Brief creators to send through native statics, as I mentioned this a moment ago. That is now extremely, extremely important, because obviously, the more statics we have through, you might as well kill two birds with one stone, right? If you've got a UGC video from a creator, it takes them 2 seconds to take a photo of them with the product. That there's, as we've shown through the examples within this deck, there's huge amounts of things we can be testing there to differentiate personas through those visual changes within the iterations. And then finally, and this just goes from what we've said previously, but I feel like the new creative diversity changes really lend themselves to more whitelisting and more emphasis on whitelisting, because as we know, like if we are whitelisting with a creator, every time we do that, it's going to have its own entity ID. There's not going to be that differentiation there. So it lends itself to creative diversity and differentiation. That's just a very quick rundown of how we're using or thinking about creative diversification. It's very early days. I'll probably do a follow-up here in the new year once we have a little bit more data to go by. But every example that I shared, or at least the 80% of them that came from us specifically, every example I shared that came from us is a top spender, and it has become a top spender from the point of when we shifted to creative diversification and Meta's new updates there. So if you've got any questions, please let me know in the comments and we will make sure to get back to you on that. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, give us a like and subscribe on both Spotify and YouTube, and we will see you on the next episode.